On this tape, I want to talk about sensory problems in autism. When I was a child, I had all the standard symptoms of autism: screaming, no one couldn't stand to be touched, couldn't stand when people hugged me, constant tantrums, and no language. I mean, not being able to talk was very frustrating. But one of the things that a lot of people neglect in autism is the sensory problems. Problems with things like sensitivity to hearing. First of all, autism is a developmental disorder. The child is born with it. It's caused by immature development in the cerebellum and the limbic system, which is the part of the brain involved with emotion. This is something that happens while a fetus is developing. It is not caused by bad parenting. Another problem that autistic children have is they're very slow to shift attention. Normal people will shift attention in, just a few milliseconds. But an autistic person may take a full second to shift attention. Now, one of the problems I had as a kid was hearing sensitivity. When the school bell went off, that hurt my ears. But before I get into talking more about sensory problems, I want to discuss the importance of having really good teachers. Here's a teacher here working with a little kid, encouraging turn-taking and playing a game. Good teachers are worth their weight in gold. People get very concerned about whether they're in this program or in that program. The most important thing is having the right teacher and getting a lot of hours every week of working with a child, keeping him tuned into the world. Why do autistic kids tune out? Sound hurts. And for some kids, visual stimuli hurt. Other kids, touch stimuli hurt. So they withdraw to get away from this overwhelming stimulation. But the problem is, if you let the child withdraw, his brain will probably get secondary brain damage. This is one of the reasons why early intervention works. My mother hired a nanny, and the nanny spent 20 hours a week just playing games with me. Things like this. Another thing I had Miss Manners meals. Here are some little children having to sit down and have proper manners. Every meal I had to sit and I had to behave myself. I wasn't allowed to put my fork up like this and just stare at it. I had to keep connected to the world. Now here's a teacher grabbing the little kid's chin saying, "Come on now, look at me." My speech teacher used to do this with me. She'd grab my chin and she could kind of just pull me out of it. And then she'd hold up a ball and she'd go like, "Say ball, ball, say ball." And she could pull me out of my daydreaming and tuning out. Now the thing is that there's all different levels of sensory problems in autism. They range from very, very mild to extremely severe. My problems were relatively mild. The school bell hurt my ears. But in a child with more severe sensory problems, grabbing their chin may cause the sensory system to overload and shut down. Because some children are mono-channel. They cannot see and hear at the same time. They either have to look at something or they have to hear something, but they cannot do both together. Some of them get sensory jumbling and mixing. Some of them have body boundary problems. They're not able to figure out where a table begins and their hand starts. These children, you've got to use a much more gentle approach. Where grabbing me by the chin, that worked with me, but with a child with more severe problems, you may have to get in a darkened room and just use one sensory channel at a time, talk very softly. I was talking to some applied behavior therapists, and this therapist said to me, "Well, I have 3 little kids I'm working with, and 2 are doing just great, but the other little girl was not making any progress." And I said, "What's happening is you're overloading her sensory problems." One of the things about autism is it is an extremely variable disorder. Now, here's a picture that a young man sent to me showing how sound hurts his ears. In fact, this picture's in a book that Wayne has. And when the school bell went off, it just hurt like a dentist drill going down my ear. You've got to protect autistic children and adults from sensory stimulation that hurts. Because it's sort of like being inside the rock and roll speaker at the concert. How is someone going to be able to function if they are inside the speaker? It's just too loud. Now, I was the kind of child that was attracted to things like automatic doors. I thought automatic doors were just wonderful. I enjoyed watching them go back and forth. But then you'll have another autistic child where he hates automatic doors. When he watches them go back and forth, it's going to hurt his eyes. It's going to be too overwhelming. This brings up another thing about sensory problems in autism. A sound or a sight that attracts one autistic child may send another autistic child away screaming. Like, for example, one child's going to want to play with the running water. Another kid is going to, hate it and scream when he hears running water. Here's a classroom that's really bad for children with autism and a lot of the ADD and dyslexic kids. One problem you've got here is there's no wall in between the two rooms. So all the noise from the other room comes over into the other classroom. One of the problems I have is I'm not able to screen out background noise. My ears just pick up everything like an open mic. And this is not good at all. Another bad thing in this room is it has fluorescent lighting. Many autistic children and adults can see the fluorescent lights flicker. Just drives them up the wall. Get some lamps from home and get some regular old-fashioned incandescent lighting. Computer screens can also be a big problem, especially if they're cheap monitors that have a low refresh rate. Some people can see the screens flicker. Even some of the dyslexic kids will see this. Now, laptop screens don't flicker. I've had a number of parents say to me, oh, it works much better on the laptop than on the regular computer. And that's because that type of screen doesn't flicker. Another thing about the laptop is the keyboard is close to the screen. So if you press the letter T, you can see the key and see it appear on the screen at the same time. Because of the attention shifting problems in autism, it's hard for the child to look at the keyboard, press the button, and then look up and see it on the keyboard, on the monitor. They just don't make the connection. Another thing, I was in a small structured classroom. When I was 3 years old, my mother had me in special nursery school. They had the governess working with me. But then I went into a normal kindergarten, but it was small structured classes. It wasn't 30 kids running around doing 10 different things. That would not have worked for me. Now, this slide shows what words look like to some people with autism and dyslexia. They're just all jumbled together. There are visual processing problems. Now, how do you know whether a child's got visual processing problems? Well, if you see a lot of this business around the eyes, or a lot of looking out the corner of their eye, because some of the children with very severe visual problems can see more clearly with their peripheral vision than with their central vision. And this is something that really needs to be checked out, because there's things that you can do to help improve this. Now, some people actually get visual distortions. This is one of Van Gogh's paintings. And Van Gogh probably saw visual distortions like this when he looked at the sky. Now, when I was a child, I didn't have these problems. Again, I want to emphasize just how variable autism is. But people that get migraines will have strange distortions. And these distortions seem to be similar to descriptions of visual problems from people like Donna Williams. This is a picture out of Oliver Sacks's migraine book. If you want to get some insights into visual processing problems, that's a very interesting book to read. And this shows how a visual image can actually break up as the visual system starts to malfunction. And this is a painting done by a migraine sufferer to show how things are distorted. And you can just barely see the image of what this is. And here's another painting of kind of some buildings, but you can barely see it. The visual system isn't working right. I want to make it very clear that these are not hallucinations. What this is problems with how the visual system is processing the information. A lot of these kids that remain nonverbal, they're like little jammed TV stations. Very little information gets through into their head. Now, with some of the other kids, you'll have problems with what I call clipping. Because of the attention shifting problem, if you ask them a question, they may not hear the first 2 or 3 words of the sentence. So you want to get their attention first, and then ask them the question. Now, this is some interesting research done on echolalia and autism. Echolalia is when a child repeats something back. You know, okay, maybe you might say, walk the dog, and he says, walk the dog. Or he may be singing TV commercials. And one of the things we've got to look at a lot more in autism is how good is a child's receptive language? Is he understanding what we're saying? Autistic kids are masters at tricking you into think they have receptive language. Like a mother might say to me, well, when I ask him to get his coat, he gets his coat. And I said, yeah, but he sees you getting the car keys. That's not receptive language. If you really want to test whether or not you've got receptive language, ask him to do something silly like put the book in the refrigerator. Well, if he puts the book in the refrigerator, then you know he has receptive language. Now you can go out, do a hearing test, do a pure tone hearing test, and guess what? It'll be normal. But a pure tone hearing test doesn't mean diddly on being able to hear complex speech sounds. I pass a pure tone hearing test just fine. But I have problems differentiating between hard consonant sounds, like bog or fog. A lot of this I have to figure out by context. Obviously, the airport's not going to be bogged in. It's going to be fogged in. And we need to work with these children to help them hear these sounds. My speech teacher used to do this with me. She'd hold up a ball and she'd go, bah, bah, say ball. Now, this research from Australia has shown that as receptive language gets worse, echolalia tends to increase. Why are kids echolalic? They're doing it to verify what's been said. Now there's a point where receptive language gets so bad that you don't have any speech at all. In other words, the radio station is so badly jammed that nothing gets through at all. Actually, echolalia is a good sign, because echolalia means that the brain is processing speech. Kids that are echolalic, they can sing a whole Barney tape or some other, children's video, sing a lot, a whole big part of it. Those kids can learn how to talk. And they are going to learn how to talk by reading whole words and relating them to pictures. In fact, a good way to teach them is flashcards. You have a photograph of a dog, the word dog, on the same side of the card. It's got to be on the same side of the card. And you hold it up and you say dog. And they see the picture, and they hear the word, and they see the word, all at the same time. And there are a number of autistics that are high functioning that didn't learn how to speak until they were 10 and 12 years old. And they were highly echolalic, and they learned with flashcards. Now the children that are maybe 8 or 9 years old and have no echolalia at all, that's not a good sign.